Thank you. And welcome to this virtual meeting of the Council on Tuesday, 14th of July 2020. I'm Cllr David Malek, the Mayor of Luton, and I'm chairing the meeting this evening. Before we begin, would members and officers please remember to mute your microphones, and the video conferencing button when speaking or pressing or presenting an item, and turn your phones to silent. Say your name when you first speak. Open the conversation window by clicking on the speech bubble. Use the conversation window to indicate you have a comment or question when invited to do so during not a public meeting. You are most welcome to this meeting to listen to the debate by members, but I must ask that the conversation window is for use by elected members only. The first item of business is to receive the minutes of the meeting of the Council held on 19th of February 2020 as set out on page 4 to 11. Does the Council approve the minutes and agree to me signing them correct record? Agreed, Mr. Mayor. If any members object, please indicate, otherwise I will assume all members are in agreement.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Apologies for absence. Are there any apologies?
I'm humbled to be the Council's Chief Executive, and this evening, Mr. Mayor, we have apologies from Councillor Agbery and Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Robin. Are there any other apologies? No, thank you. I've got some announcements to make today. First of all, I would like to express on behalf of the Council our sympathies to all those who have been affected by or lost their lives or loved ones to COVID-19, and to record our thanks to the Council staff, NHS staff, emergency services and local charitable organizations who have responded tirelessly to the emergency situation. The Council will also be aware that June 2020 marked the 25th anniversary of the atrocities that took place in Srebrenica. I ask the Council to observe 1 minute silence in remembrance of those who lost their lives in both. Support to address the effects of COVID-19 on the Council's finances, and to Luton's 2 MPs for speaking about this in the House of Commons on behalf of the residents of Luton. In the spirit of recognition and appreciation of the work that our staff, key workers and NHS health partners have played in responding to COVID-19, please join me in a 1 minute round of applause and clap for our carers. Hand over to Chief Executive Robin Potter to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All members of the Council have been circulated with a list of items before the Council this evening, which fall within the ambit of the Section 106 of the Local Government Finance Act 1992. Any member affected should disclose the fact and refrain from voting on any question relating to those items. I have received no Section 106 disclosures. With regards to disclosures of interest, I've received the following disclosures of interest. Councillor Keynes has disclosed a personal interest in agenda item 6.1 in that his mother is sheltered housing accommodation. Councillor Cllr Malik has disclosed a personal interest in agenda item 6.1 insofar as it relates to London Luton Airport in his capacity as an owner of a travel agency business in Luton. All directors of the Airport Board have a personal and prejudicial interest in recommendations 3 and 8 of the budget report at agenda item 6.1 and must refrain from participating or voting on the item insofar as it relates to the proposals affecting London Luton Airport Limited. Agenda item 6.1 will be moved in two parts so as to allow the airport directors to participate in the substantive budget motion and for it to be moved by Cll Malcolm, but not those recommendations 3 and 8 that relate to London Luton Airport Limited. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Robin. Bedfordshire Fire and Rescue Authority. No written notice has been given.
Mr. Mayor.
To accept the fire brigade report.
There isn't one. There isn't a report.
I haven't gone to the report yet, have we?
They could.
There was a complete error basically. So we are moving on to agenda item 9.1. The next item is
said
the
6.1.
consideration of the emergency budget.
Oh, that's what we want.
Members, please note that I'm allowing Councillor Malcolm an unlimited time to present the emergency budget, applying Standing Order 16.10(4) to this meeting. Now, I would like to invite Councillor Malcolm to speak to agenda item 6.1.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Andy Malcolm. I'm the councillor with
Hightown.
Luton Borough Council. Usually, Budget Council is an opportunity to reflect on our vision for our town, the progress we have made, and the challenges we see before us. We are here for this emergency budget meeting because the last of these, the challenges before us, are of such significance and the support from central government so lacking as to require us to reconsider our planned expenditure on services within our budget. Tonight, I will start by talking in a little more detail about why we are here. I then want to cover some of the key changes to services outlined in this budget and draw our attention to a few areas of the report before us before summing up. So first, why are we here? The most important piece of context is the 10 years of unrelenting austerity, which have meant over the 8 years up to our initial budget for this year, we had agreed £135 million of savings across our annual budget meetings. A key element of our response to the huge cuts in funding we previously received from central government was to grow the income we received from our airport company. This increased from just 7.6 million in 2012-13 up to £32.3 million last year. In fact, in Luton, we receive more from trading and investments, including the airport, than we do from council tax. In our initial budget for this year, 26 pence of every pound spent on local services was to come from council tax, with 30 pence coming from trading and investments. Yet the coronavirus crisis has broken our defences against austerity, and we and our communities will now bear this full burden. With flights virtually at a standstill, our airport company will not be in a position to pay dividends to the council this year or next year. The final and most fundamental reason as to why we are here is that the government has simply not provided sufficient support. Despite our repeated requests since March and the 10,000 signature strong petition shared and signed by the people of Luton, we have recently submitted to government. All this at a time when local government and the communities that we represent have together been stepping up in response to the coronavirus crisis.
Shouldn't have gone into such
This
debt.
last point is really important, as we truly are between a rock and a hard place. We have suffered a dramatic loss of income, yet we still have a legal obligation to balance our budget and furthermore to address any issues in year. This is why the lack of support from central government is so important. Local government cannot borrow and spend to get through a crisis. Central government can borrow and is borrowing to spend to get through this crisis. As such, support in this unprecedented situation has to come from there, but it hasn't. So, we are here tonight to consider this budget, which outlines sizable service reductions, certainly the most significant that I've presented in my last 5 years as the lead councillor for finance. The changes outlined in this budget fall across 4 broad areas. Those which are internal to the council, those relating to general council services, those in adult social care and health, and those relating to education, family support and children. And because of the scale, tell about each of those areas, and we'll come to do so in a moment. I think Councillor Burnett put it best at the executive meeting which considered this budget, that it is with a profound sense of grief that we agree what is before us. The profound loss in this budget is crystallised in the 365 redundancies that the report outlines.
Oh, there won't be officers and directors.
Now, we will of course do our utmost to mitigate the impact of this on council staff. Indeed, 107 of these posts are currently vacant, and we've opened our voluntary separation scheme. And 260 of the posts are in school catering, so most of these will be picked up and transferred into individual schools or private companies who provide meals. However, none of this can undo the disruption that this will cause for those in these services, particularly at such a challenging time. The first of the 4 areas of saving are savings which are internal to the council. It is impressive that council officers have managed to find £5.55 million of process and efficiency savings, £1.93 million of trading and commercialisation savings, and £1.88 million of procurement and commissioning savings. In addition to these internal savings, a restructuring of our senior management team will also save £0.5 million. The second area of savings is making savings by making changes to general services that people in Luton will notice. Our customer service centre delivery model will change, so that people who need and have an appointment will be seen face to face, but those who don't will have to make use of our phone or online access opportunities. We absolutely want to support those who require it, but we must also separate out those who can't from those who currently won't. We're going to have to look again at our council tax reduction scheme. This will very much have to be based on a least worst option. It's not something we want to do, but then none of this is. We're going to have to start charging £35 a year for an all-year brown bin collection, with this service discontinued for those who don't take up this option. We'll be saving money through LED street lights, so changes to light volumes will not be noticeable. We're going to be reducing our neighbourhood enforcement team. On that note, I want to assure members and anyone at home that there still will very enforcement team. It's become an invaluable part of our approach over recent years, but they will no longer work into evenings, and the team will be slightly reduced using current vacancies. Our economic development team will also have to be reduced, but refocused on our ambitions for no one in Luton to be in poverty by 2040. And there are hopes that we will be able to tap into external funds to support this delivery. The third area of savings is in adult social care and health. We will be reducing our spend on public health by £1 million in this year and a further £500,000 the next year. The £1 million this year comes 50-50 from an increase of grant not yet committed and from reserves. However, from next year, the ongoing savings of £1.5 million will need to involve reviewing contracted services to consider first efficiency and effectiveness, and then finally reductions. Mental health social work is currently provided by another organisation, and the contract is up for review in March next year. so changes would be from this date. There are a few models being considered, but the savings will be realised by bringing this service in-house to better integrate it and limit the impact of the reduction on service delivery. We're also reviewing our adult social care provision and transport. The transport savings are a mix of savings from closures in the current context and expectations of savings in future years which relate to the review of provision, which will be across daycare, extra care, reablement and supported living. Together, these areas are targeting a cumulative saving of £101.92 million over the next 2 years. The fourth and final area of significant change is child. Sadly, we are no longer in a position to run our own school meal service, and as already mentioned, this is where the majority of the job losses outlined in this emergency budget come from. Our youth offending team will see a reduction, although this will be offset by fully maintaining our targeted youth service. Children's centres, our contact service, early help and disability support will be joined up and will have to become a more targeted resource. To date, our Flying Start offer to support families with children aged between 0 and 5 has been a universal service of which we have been incredibly proud. Sadly, this is no longer an option, and provision will need to be more targeted towards those who will benefit from early support. Lastly, in this area, we are having to move from a school improvement service to a service focused on effectiveness, a reduction in the size of the team which reflects the ongoing hollowing out of the local authority's role in the provision of education. I also want tonight to draw our attention to a few areas of the report. Paragraph 42 notes the monthly monitoring which I will undertake along with our Chief Finance Officer and Chief Executive. This will be highly important given the scale of our predicament and the need to begin to deliver these savings as quickly as possible. Paragraph 59 and its subsections set out our Chief Finance Officer's views on the budget. I would in particular like to draw our attention to paragraphs 59.3 and 59.4, where our Chief Finance Officer sets out that developing an emergency budget in just 8 weeks is a tribute to the calibre of it. I certainly want, and I'm sure all members here tonight would want to echo this, and thank every council employee who has contributed to this process, in particular the finance team, who have delivered what usually takes 7 months in such a short period of time. And all of this at the same time as responding to the worst natural disaster since the Second World War. And to any staff who have tuned in tonight, thank you. Thank you to our staff teams who have been doing 60+ hour weeks dealing with the coronavirus crisis, make this emergency budget hanging over our heads and anxieties about job security. There has been growing interest in the prospect of Council's Chief Finance Officers issuing Section 114 reports, and paragraph 65 of this budget report states, as the Council is taking the necessary measures to address the budget gap this year, at this stage there is no need to issue a Section 114 report. So the approach we are taking is alleviating any need to do that at the moment. Indeed, paragraph 66 sets out the recent changes to the SIPFA guidance to Chief Finance Officers in relation to issuing a Section 114. Essentially, that they should be in touch with the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government before going down this path. This change to the guidance is absolutely meaningless if government is unwilling to support local authorities. We have been asking for support since March and still nothing.
Due to your incompetence.
Robert Jenrick, the Minister for Local Government, stood on that press briefing platform and declared that they would stand with local government. And he has been backtracking and qualifying ever since. This is yet another example in a growing list where this government's rhetoric does not match up to reality.
And what do you think a Labour government would have
Boris
done for
Johnson's
you?
government
Propaganda speech.
has not provided sufficient support. Full stop.
Take the blame yourselves.
But we will not give up our fight for fair support.
Neither will I.
And it would be fair support because we were told we needed to generate commercial income to fund services. We did this, we were applauded by government for doing so, and now we're being punished for it because there is no support forthcoming as yet. We will continue to call on the government to stand by their promises, to match their rhetoric with reality, to give substance to their statements. So yes, it is with a profound sense of grief and loss that I move this budget. Privileged in life has always been at the heart of our approach, which is why it hurts so much to be making some of these changes. This budget has, of course, been through the formal council structures, including scrutiny finance review, so members have had an opportunity to ask key officers about these proposals. We've also sought and received feedback from the public, from council employees, and we've held virtual meetings with community groups, including young people, to discuss and answer their questions. Some of the details of this engagement are set out in paragraphs 56 through 81 of the report, and some of the suggestions have been vital and really encouraging in developing our response to this crisis. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I move recommendations 1, 2, 4, 5, 6 and 7 as set out at paragraph 2, and I pass to the Leader of the Council recommendations 3 and 8 so as to maintain appropriate separation where recommendations relate to our airport company, of which I am the Chair of the Board of Directors.
Jobs for the boys.
Thank you, Councillor Malcolm. Councillor Hazel Simmons. Councillor Simmons.
She's probably fallen asleep listening to that rubbish.
Hazel.
Wake up.
Alfie.
Looks like they've all gone to sleep.
Hello. Yes, we can. Yes, I do. Thank you.
You can look underneath, you can hear you.
Yes, Hazel, we can see you and can hear you.
Okay. My apologies to everyone. I will start again. I apologise. I don't know what was wrong with my computer. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And in order to potential of a conflict of interest between Andy's positions as the finance portfolio and the chair of the Luton board, the LAL board, I am proposing those recommendations related to LAL. Recommendation 8 notes that discussion is taking place between LAL and the airport operator and that a further report will be submitted to Council and as the LAL shareholder at an appropriate time. Recommendation 3 seeks approval of the capital programme, which is a matter for Councillor Malcolm, but I will address any discussion of the added note to that recommendation, which states that those projects relating to additional debenture loans to LAL require specific executive approval before they proceed, based on appropriate reports and scrutiny prior to any decision being made. Paragraphs 15 to 24 of the report set out the background to LAL's current position and its profound impact on the Council's finances. In order to inform members of one of the key reasons why this emergency budget is required now. The reason that the Council has been able to benefit directly from the financial success of the airport for the last 22 years is that in 1998 it signed a contract to share the risks and rewards with the operator. Over the years, that contract has been hugely beneficial for the people of Luton and their council.
Not week
The
one.
report shows that in 12-13, the net income from Lowell was 7.6 million. Between then and last year, at the same time as government grant was dramatically reduced, the net income increased to 32.3 million. However, there can come a risk, and this has been set out in the council-approved budget risk management strategy each year. However, the level of risks posed by COVID-19 has taken everyone by surprise, and every effort is being made both at national and regional level in order to ensure that the economy is not scared permanently and gradually returns to a new normal, which undoubtedly will have other impacts in the medium to long term. The long-term extent of the risk is dependent on the legal interpretation of exactly how the clauses in the contract that refer to force majeure are applied in relation to the impact of COVID-19, as noted in paragraphs 18 and 22 of the report. This will need to be understood prior to the consideration of furlough. However, let me clarify that the report before us this evening does not request any further loans to Lowell.
I shouldn't think
Any
so.
requests that do come through will be dealt with separately via our normal government's arrangements, which are going to Finance Review Group and then to the Executive.
And then passes anyway.
For the current year's revenue budget, though it is crystal clear that due to the impact of COVID-19 on the airport, the Council cannot expect any dividend from Lowell. Together with other COVID-related increases in costs and reduction in income, they form the basis on which the emergency budget has been prepared. I therefore move recommendations 3 and recommendations 8.
Are the motions seconded?
Yes. Seconded, Mayor. Councillor Abbas.
Thank you, Councillor Abbas. I now propose to take any questions on the report. Before taking questions, I would advise that under standing orders, a member may ask only one question plus supplementaries. However, I have discretion to allow a member to ask more than one question. In accordance with the budget protocol applied to this meeting, I'm going to allow the first member of each of the Liberal Democrat and Conservative group who indicates in the conversation window that they wish to ask a question to ask an unlimited number of questions and supplementaries of the mover of the motion within a total time of 20 minutes each. The normal rule will then apply to all other members. Robin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Please note that questions relating to the budget proposals concerning recommendations 1, 2, 4, 5, 6 and 7 will be answered by Councillor Malcolm, and questions concerning recommendations 3 and 8 will be answered by Councillor Simmons, so as to maintain the separation previously advised.
Thank you, Robin. Are there any questions on the report?
Mr. Mayor, I have indicated in the correspondence box that I would like to ask some questions.
Thank you, David.
Well,
Please.
okay, I'd like to start with the relationship between the council and its airport company, please. As I understand it, the airport company can't pay the interest on the loans already made by the council, so you're proposing to bung another £83 million to the airport. Have I got that right?
Well said, Mr. Franks, for once.
these long pauses are not counting against my 20 minutes, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Simmons, could you respond to that question?
I could. I didn't hear the end of the question.
Oh, for goodness sake.
As I understand it, the airport company can't pay the interest on loans already made by the council, so you've decided to bung another £83 million to the airport. Have I got that right, please?
We haven't decided to bung anything to anybody, David. As I explained very clearly in my report, any request for further funding will come through the normal process.
So are you saying the £60 million you're proposing to give the airport this year and the £23 million next year are not approved if this budget is passed?
They are in the programme. You know the normal procedure that as a council we use. We do that, but as we always say, good governance is for all loan applications go through our normal finance review group and then to the council. So no loan to anybody is actually approved.
So both of those will end up on the executive for final approval?
They'll go through the normal procedure, as very clearly laid out in the report, David.
Could I ask what, please, is the current total outstanding debt owed to LBC by the airport company?
Another silence.
Yeah.
I'm afraid I can't tell you that. I'll give you a written response on that.
What? So we don't.
Thank you very much. Let's move on then. A second, screen has gone somewhere I didn't want it to go. Yeah, on page 47 of the council papers, I think this is intended for Andy Malcolm actually, not Hazel Simmons, is a review of apprentices and a cut of £30,000 over 2 years. Does Councillor Malcolm understand the importance of providing employment opportunities for our young people as we recover from the coronavirus crisis? And how does he think this will help, please?
I think I would respond by asking him, does he understand the scale of the crisis before us? You can't just ignore the scale of the challenge that we're having to face up to. To mitigate the impact of losing these apprentice posts, we will not be losing them until they are vacant. I believe 2 of the 3 are vacant at the moment and 1 will become vacant in time. But you have to make some difficult decisions. I know that you don't like making difficult decisions, which is why you don't ever take any responsibility for anything.
Rudeness is
but we are
uncalled for.
having to, so that is the process we're going to go through.
John, thank you very much for that. I'll take that as a confirmation that you don't think it will help. You may not be pleased about that, but at least you're admitting you don't think it will help. On page 49, we come to the housing revenue account, taking houses which are currently in the general fund. Are we entitled to assume that Councillor Malcolm has already discounted the fact that once in the housing revenue account, the general fund houses will be subject to the right to buy at massive discounts?
I believe they will be protected from that in this transfer, and I'm getting a nod, so that is true. I'm not entirely sure of the legalities of how that is going to be protected, but that is my understanding. The 2 sets of properties, so the retail properties and the housing properties, are of equal value, but agreement does need to be sought with the tenants board before the transfer can be made.
I understand that, and thank you. I would appreciate if you could give me a written response to explain how the houses will be protected from the right to buy. Very interesting. That would be helpful.
If I could help, David, most of those properties a lot of the properties are bungalows, which are because of the special needs will be on the council's exempt register.
Thank you. The new council tax reduction scheme. In February, we were told the 1.2 million cut in the council tax reduction scheme would leave 2,200 of the poorest households with an extra council tax bill of £900. Is Cllr Malcolm now going to clobber the same 2,200 families, and how much more that they can't afford is he forcing them to pay, please?
It's unfortunate that you are willfully misrepresenting the state of that policy change by noting the largest amount that someone might see a reduction in terms of the support that they previously received, and applying that across the board to all people who receive support currently. That was, change did in fact increase the support that some people received, and of course this is the most the poorest residents of our town, and we do it very cautiously, but again, the scale of the challenge before us means that we have to look at things that are going to be the least worst option on the table. So we're going to have to look at it again. There are in fact some discrepancies in the existing scheme that I think we can make some positive changes in relation to, but in the round it will be negative changes in terms of having to relook at the council tax reduction scheme.
Yeah, I think I need to remind Cllr Malcolm that the written report that went to the February budget meeting said that the average additional bill for the 2,200 families would be £900. So I guess in some cases it would have been more. And just for his edification, the average of, if it's the same to have to pay now, is just under £220, which of course we can't afford. I wonder if he could explain how he expects to achieve the adult social care model provision cuts of 459 million in the current year, 712 in the following year. These are very precise figures, so I guess you must have detailed plans on how that's going to work.
As you're aware, we have delivered this emergency budget in a very quick time frame. So no, there are not detailed plans in terms of what will not be continued and how things will change. The review of this provision, as I made clear in my speech, relates to extra care, daycare, reablement and stages across those services. We don't know what they will look like as yet. But to make those savings, there will be changes across those services. There is a possibility that we will set up a local authority traded company to run some of those services to move away from the current model. But that is one possibility that's on the table that might bring forward a better model alongside having to make some of the reductions that we simply have to make because of the scale of the challenge that is before us.
Thank you. Not much extra information there then. Library efficiencies. This is a cut of £100,000 this year and another £100,000 next year. How inefficient are our libraries then?
This proposal is from the February budget, so it's not an additional proposal for this budget.
Wigmore has no library or internet connection for the whole residents.
Residential care cut to £400,000 on page 50. Is this a renegotiation with the private care home providers, please?
Really, sadly, we're anticipating that it might not be quite £400,000, which is an upside to very much what is a downside, a very sad situation with deaths of so many people in care homes because of coronavirus. There will be fewer users, and that was the original assumption. Thankfully, that saving probably won't be quite £400,000 in year because the numbers tailed off, thankfully.
Thank you very much indeed. Move on to page 51. Leisure and cultural estate cut of very large cut. Again, very precise figures, 1.649 million in the current year and 825,000 next year. Where have I got that from? 825,000 in the current year and the same next year, a total of 1.649. Again, it's a very precise figure, so should we presume there are detailed plans?
Again, you should have asked that in February, because this February budget proposal, the ones in the first column and the second column are ones from February. The ones in solely the second column, or if the numbers have changed, are ones for this changes for this emergency budget. We have to present them side by side because we're in the unprecedented situation of running an in-year emergency budget to supplement the original 2020-2021 budget. That is about that saving was about making changes to the estate, and that is something that we are in conversation with our providers about.
Yeah, I recall I did ask it in February. I didn't get an answer then either, so you clearly haven't worked it out yet. Where should we go next? Neighbourhood enforcement team, £170,000. Are you satisfied that the council is able to enforce all the things it should be enforcing now? And how do you expect it to perform once you've made this cut, so your enforcement stops at 6 in the evening instead of 10?
So this saving is, yes, some slightly reduced hours of operation, so there won't be evening patrols anymore, but also a reduction of a third in the number of posts, so from 12 posts total down to 8 posts. Actually, in terms of what the service will deliver, all those posts are currently vacant, and it has been historically challenging to employ to that team. So I'm hopeful that broadly the standards enforcement will remain as is. And as I said in my speech, it is a really important part of our approach to delivering improvements to our town. And I'm pleased that we are keeping elements of it, although with the scale of what we're facing, having to see some reductions in places.
Okay. Service reduction in regulatory services due to vacant posts, 183,000. First question has to be, do you think the fact that there are vacant posts is a good reason for reducing the service? And what are you going to stop regulating?
Nothing will stop being regulated, as you're well aware. Where there are vacant posts and they're not filled by agency staff, it means that there are those roles, those services are being covered by a smaller number of employees. And some of the changes a reduced number of staff in that area will require, for some of those services, a changed model of operation. But actually that will be in line with the changes that we're outlining for customer services. There are many front-facing areas of the council, not just in customer services, which can also make changes in line with what the service delivery has had to look like over the coronavirus period. So there's almost a model in place there that we can now move to for some of these things.
Okay. Are you anticipating any reduction, for example, in regulation of the hygiene standards in food establishments?
No.
A direct answer for once.
Yes, that's some reassurance. You're cutting highway maintenance by just under £400,000. How much longer do you suggest I tell my constituents they will have to wait for potholes to be filled and roads to be resurfaced?
I believe potholes should be filled within 24 hours as set out in our policy. We're not changing the policy, it's just that we've had some additional funding that we're able to make this in-year one-off saving. As you can see from the documents, that it is a one-off saving. We've had some additional funding that allows us to make this, to fill this budget problem that we are facing.
Okay, school crossing patrols, £23,000. Is this actually cancelling school crossing patrols, or is it passing yet more of the burden onto the schools?
This is discontinuing school crossing patrols where they aren't officially fully required in line with current vacancies. So it's not passing any responsibility on, it is where they're not necessarily fully needed, and there are already vacancies in place that allow us to make these savings.
Okay, garden waste collections then, £300,000. How many brown bins are you expecting to empty?
I think we've modelled this on around 35% take-up, those lines, and it's a £35 charge.
Okay, if you divide your £300,000 by 35, that means you will be emptying about 8,500, between 8,500 and 9,000 bins. Currently emptying 45,000 brown bins. What's going to happen to the garden waste from the 37,000 bins that you're currently emptying but don't expect to be emptying when the brown bin tax comes in?
Well, some of it might end up at the local tidy tips, or people uptake might be considerably higher than we've currently modelled, or people might compost more in their gardens. I'm sure there are a number of options that you're well aware of to answer your question.
Working on the assumption that none of it will be blighted then?
You know what? I'm really hopeful that the Venn diagram for people who fly tip and people who have a brown bin and use it regularly are actually quite far apart and don't overlap very much. Also, I think this is a proposal for people who called in and wrote in to say, could we pay more council tax to help you get through this really challenging situation? There are people out there who want to support the council more, and there will be people who want to buy this service so that they can continue to use it and also provide that support to the council.
What? Is your hearing aid?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. That will do for the moment, Mr. Mayor.
Well done, David.
I might as well give notice now that at the appropriate time I would like to make a comment.
Thank you very much, Councillor Frank. I would like to invite Councillor John Young, Conservative Group Leader, to ask questions. He's got 20 minutes.
Managed to deliver the £21.6 million of savings, and in relation to the £7.5 million that you mentioned, they are already offset by contingencies written into the budget because we know we were unlikely to deliver them in full this year as well. So there is the detail in the report around how much we're expecting to make use of reserves to get through this crisis, but we have no choice but to act now. Otherwise, the use of reserves just increases. At least if we act now, we can start making some of the savings that we need to make after today to try and get our budget back into line. But the details of how much we anticipate using in terms of our reserves are set out in the report at paragraph 59.
So does that mean that the savings will be put forward to the following year and again onto the following year, so that in fact, in theory, they never happen?
Sorry. Need to happen. They absolutely must happen, and they will not be brought forward year on year. They are as detailed in the papers. They are detailed for this financial year and for next financial year, and some of them are cumulative and increase over those 2 years. Because some of these things are going to take a little bit of time to deliver. Usually a budget setting process takes 7 months. It's been done in around 7 or 8 weeks this time. So of course it's going to take a bit of a while. And I would actually note for yourself and other members that in the table that sets out all of the budget proposals, where there is a 1 or a 2 in the final column in terms of the equality impact on equalities, unless that is an internal reorganisation and doesn't need policy approval, the vast majority of those where there is a 1 or 2 in that final column will come through for additional scrutiny, either to scrutiny finance review or through the exec before they are implemented. I think that's a really important point for away with. So we're not fundamentally agreeing all of these things, no turning back. There's still opportunity to consider their impact and mitigate that impact as we move towards delivering on these savings. But we have no choice but to deliver savings so as to not be in a predicament where our income doesn't match our expenditure. We have to deliver this budget and we have to make these savings, which is why those monthly meetings that I referenced are happening with myself, the Chief Finance Officer and the Chief Executive.
Thank you, Councillor Malcolm. The departments with the largest potential impact is children's, families and education, well-being and public health. These departments, the savings required are about 10 million. These services are demand-led. Big times, demand is likely to increase. So how would you square the circle?
I think it's a really good question. I enjoyed participating in the meeting with young people who asked a similar question. We got to similar ground actually. There's the statutory services that we have to provide, which you're referencing there, where we might see increased demand, which we'll have to cope with. There's targeted early intervention services, and then there's universal services. Quite a bit of what this budget does is that we can't afford these universal services anymore, particularly in relation to children's centres. We're going to have to take a more targeted approach, more early intervention approach to delivering that. In relation to statutory services, that is what that £7.5 million that you mentioned in your previous question is all about. It's about improving our efficiency and delivering the best value for money that we can deliver as a council in terms of those statutory services that we have to deliver. We need to deliver and we want to deliver to support those who are missing out in life on privileged opportunities. But we can still make savings there, but they're of a different type, because it's all about making sure the service you're delivering is as efficient and as much value for money as possible. Whereas some of those other areas, you want to maintain early intervention to avoid spend, and that's what we keep an eye on a lot of the time. But then ideally you would have universal services, but you know, with the massive reduction in money that we have available to deliver services as outlined in this budget, one of the changes is around children's and family support, early help, children's centres, contact centre and disability support, and that is moving from more of a universal service to more of a targeted service.
Thank you very much, Councillor Malcolm. Unfortunately, that's all the questions I'm allowed to ask. Thank you very much.
Why are so many councillors on the airport board?
Thank you very much, Councillor Young. I'll go. I have 6 people waiting for questioning now. So first of all, I would like to ask Councillor Haji Abid to ask question. Abid.
Chair, simply, Chair, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Simply wanted to ask, are there any minimum level the airport dividends contractually that the airport's supposed to make annually?
He hasn't got his picture up. Oh.
Debug.
Mr. Mayor, just to confirm.
Yeah, Councillor Simmons, please.
Oh, sorry. My apologies. My apologies. Based on passengers, the passengers we have through the airport each year. That's based on that. And it's part of our concession agreement.
Who's that in the background? Gary Roberts?
Looks like it.
Abid, you okay?
Oh, strange she's gone offline now.
Yeah, I think so. Thanks.
Somebody helping her.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to Councillor Keynes. He wants to make comments. Councillor Keynes.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. I'm concerned, and I'm sure my committee, Children's Services, are concerned about the level of cuts that we're going to have to make. Sterling work has already been done by the children's officers and social workers. We're worried that this could be reduced. I'm willing to sit with Councillor Malcolm any time and see if we can do something to make some of these cuts a lot softer. I appreciate it's a big problem that we've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keynes. I will certainly happy to take up that offer to attend Children's Scrutiny Review Group if you'd like me to come along, or meet beforehand even. One of the things that I am doing in relation to those £7.5 million of savings that Councillor Young mentioned is I am meeting with the children, aim on delivering some of those service improvements, which are that first type where, you know, it's statutory services that we absolutely have to deliver, but we want to deliver them at the best quality, but also to improve efficiency so that we're not spending money that we don't need to spend on them. But yeah, absolutely, if you want to meet to talk that through and see if there's anything that your scrutiny group can do to contribute to that process, absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
I greatly appreciate that, Councillor. Yeah, you can let me know when meetings, etc., etc. I'm available most times. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Councillor Keynes. I'm just going to remind members this is question only session. So we got Councillor Wynne now. Councillor Wynne.
Yes, sorry, I've just coming back online. I've had everything muted. Good evening, Mr. Mayor. At the previous Budget Council meeting on the 19th of February, I was critical of the original LBC budget at that time and described it as a reckless gamble. And of course I understand how much the COVID-19 has been critical to proving that point. But if I may just go through and ask a very specific question. Councillor Malcolm has strongly emphasised that we should always be taking the least worst option. And Councillor Simmons explained very clearly that the additional loans to LLAL, and I might say also to Vauxhall Homes Limited, will go through the normal council processes. I would ask, please,
where's this picture up?
A real least worst option, which is to ask the boards of directors of LLAL and of Vauxhall Homes to pass board resolutions to return some of the previous loans they've already had to LBC. That way round, we would avoid having to make further loans. That is my question. Can we please get the two boards of directors to pass resolutions to return loans they have already received but not yet used?
Silence was a stern reply.
I also doing that. You won't get interest.
Hello? Mr. Mayor?
Yep, Councillor Simmons, yep.
Is it okay to answer? Yeah. I'm not sure that's a very practical question really, because the people have obviously already borrowed the money to do things with, but the reality is we actually get interest from those loans, so that is income that the council receives. Consequently, we would not go back to the board and ask them to do that request.
Councillor Simmons, may I suggest that that's not an appropriate answer because we are lending them more money in order that they can pay the interest.
That is not true for Foxhall Homes.
We are not lending them any more money. That's not what is in the report before you.
I would imagine that those loans would be on a fixed term, and if you break, there would be breakout clause. You could lose more money by breaking the
Thank you very much. We're moving on to the next question. Councillor Jeff Patrick, please.
Sorry?
Are there any amendments? Oh,
Jeff is here.
you're back.
My question is...
Ask a question, yeah? Go on.
Yeah, my question is that we're all aware of the number of agency social workers, and the cost of that is enormous. I think we'll probably have to reduce that number. What's the likely impact on our social care?
Thank you. This is one of those first areas of savings where it's a statutory obligation, so the level of service provided is not going to change. We're still going to deliver that service, absolutely. And actually, this is one of those areas of savings from the 7.5 million that was mentioned previously in another question that I'm keeping tabs on because it relates to children's services. So I'm keeping a close eye on some of those. What I would say is that we have a plan to reduce children's social work down further to below 10% of the social work workforce by February 2022. So that's something that you can keep an eye on and that we will all want to keep an eye on. We are developing a social work academy and developing our use of growing our own social workers, and that's one of the reasons keeping our targeted youth service was really important for us, because that is a route by which people can enter the organisation without a qualification for social work but then become trained up in time and move into social work roles. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Andy. Yes, it does. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pat. We're moving on to next items. Are there any amendments? Are there any amendments? No, thank you very much. Now we are moving on to next item. Does any member wish to speak to the motion? I've got a couple of names already. You are who have indicated already they're going to make comments. So first of all, I would like to call. Please.
Sorry, you broke up. We didn't hear who you called.
Yeah, Councillor Jackie Burnett.
Oh, thank you. I have to say, in reflecting and listening to the presentation, I've written down some things with a heavy heart, and one of the things that I've written down, I'm reminded when the pandemic started and I could see what was coming. It was like a shipwreck that was happening, and on the day the government made the statement that they were going to walk shoulder to shoulder with its citizens and with local authority. And now, 4 months later, I can't see nobody behind us supporting us. Yeah, we're crying out for help, having to lead the worst public health crisis in 100 years in living memory, and where's the government? And it's really hard to not talk about the situation we are and other local authorities that are falling right behind us, and leave aside politics and don't put some context to it. Yeah, and the government has been totally two-faced to local government is how I feel. Yeah, because we're having to still lead, we're having to still protect the public, we're still having to work with public health. Yeah, and they've just left us high and dry. And I'm just minded of some of the other comments we've had today. You know, we, Labour, have demonstrated during austerity the level of savings that we achieved and still delivered service. And I really do hope that gives some level of reassurance as the robustness to us as a Labour administration in Luton that we will do all that we can to protect our citizens. And the other word that came to mind today was financial stewardship.
Oh, that's Luton can't talk about that.
That's what we're trying to do. We are trying to be planning, we're trying to attention to keep management under control, and we're trying to care. We have tried to care, and we have always tried to care for our citizens. But we're left without the promise that the government has given us. And my worry, yeah, is we can't take what the government says, that we can even bank their promise. On so many things they've let down citizens. But I can't really say much more, because every time I talk sometimes I get a bit upset, and that the emotions is more anger and but we're competent, we've demonstrated that we're competent, and I really do thank officers for all what they have done in these unprecedented times, and I really am so proud of the community in taking part in the consultation and trying to come up with solutions. So thank you, Mayor, for allowing me this time to comment, but it really is with a heavy heart that we are doing this, and I really hope the government somehow finds the light and realise and remember the promises they made when we were going into this pandemic, which they were ill prepared for and left us high and dry.
No government in the world has given more to their citizens than Boris Johnson's government. All the furloughs they paid.
Councillor Khan, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Can I first of all start with thanking all the members and all the officers for doing everything they can in managing these crises, public safe, supporting the communities, supporting our most vulnerable and our frontline services. So thank you all for doing all you can to keep our Luton safe. Secondly, I want to thank our portfolio holder, Andy Malcolm, for doing a tremendous job in trying to manage these worst financial crises that we've seen in the history of our town. We do have to recognize that we are in difficult situation, we are in unusual circumstances, and we do accept the challenges from the opposition. But what we do accept is want to them to understand is this financial situation no one could plan for. Only a few months ago we were being praised for our innovation, we were being praised for managing the austerity cuts. You can plan for everything else, but not the disaster or the crisis that we are facing now. Unfortunately, it's the government, like Jackie said, who has left us and the people of Luton on our own to manage the worst crisis that we face. We're the second most worst town affected in the country, and we would expect, like our MPs and our Member of Parliaments and Lords who have rallied around to ask the government that we need special consideration, and we would like the support of the opposition to ask the government to intervene and give us a rescue package. Some of the services will have to be delivered in a different way. It's not just Luton, it's the rest of the country and the rest of the world. Some of those universal services may never return back again. We have to look at prevention
and we have to look at early help and targeted support. With the amount of resources, it has to be targeted. So again, I'd like to thank all the officers, all the members across the party for doing a fantastic job to keep our Luton and our public safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Khan. I would like to invite Councillor Shaw to make comments. Councillor Shaw, please.
Yeah. Councillor Wynne mentioned Vauxhall loans. I think he's a little bit behind on some of the reports. This weekend we had the first open day on the site at Solway Road, and every one of the private properties has now got a name by it and a reserve by it to buy those properties. With those sales, we will start paying back the council on the loans, and it also gives us more money to go elsewhere. And the board last week agreed that Vauxhall is becoming one of the council's success stories, where the interest on the loans will actually help the general fund not have to make so many cuts. So as a businessman, I'm surprised that you can't see the value of Vauxhall loans. We've taken people off our list. We've actually put people into social housing. And the next site, Sunderland Park, which is going to be finished in the next few weeks, so that'll be the second one complete, is going to be for key workers from the council. So please don't use Vauxhall loans for your own ends when it's such a success for the council, paying back money, housing people and social housing as well. It's a success no matter how much Councillor Wynne and the other councillors from Wigmore try and kick it. It's a great success. That's all I'd like to say.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Can I just comment, please? Councillor Franks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to revisit some of the key considerations that the Liberal Democrat members have had to take into account when considering our attitude to this emergency budget. And perhaps the first thing I have to say is that in spite of what the Leader of the Council said in response to a question earlier, it's quite clear from the reports that we have before us this evening that a significant part of the £83 million it is proposed to loan the airport company is going to be used to pay the interest on money that the council... There are two weird issues here. First of all, you're borrowing money to loan to the airport so it can pay interest on the money you've already loaned it. And secondly, even more worrying, I guess, is that I reckon the total that the airport company currently owes the council is in the region of £400 million. Add the £83 million and that gets you closer to £500 million. One is reminded that in a situation where the level of debt that they had was so large that their business was unable to maintain it, Debenhams twice went into administration in the last 2 years in circumstances similar to those that you're pushing your airport company to. So there are dangers there, and I hope that someone at least is keeping a close eye on it. On the council tax reduction scheme, you've already introduced a scheme which is forcing the poorest households in Luton to pay an extra £900 that they can't afford in council tax. We're now planning to make the same hard-up families pay another £220 a year that they can't afford. I really don't understand how you can seriously expect the Liberal Democrat members to support that, because we certainly won't. Adult social care, I thought everybody knew that adult social care is massively underfunded everywhere. Apparently not in Luton, it seems, because you're going to take another £2 million over 2 years. And that's in addition to the £150,000 cut you've already approved, which you're still hoping to achieve by closing St Monica's Day Centre. Where do we go from here? Well, Luton must have the most inefficient libraries in Britain.
And Wigmore has no library.
You're going to cut £200,000 from the library's budget. You said you were going to do it in February. You've had from February to July to work out how you're going to do it. And yet, in response to a question this evening, you still can't tell us how you're going to achieve that. That's incredible. If you haven't worked it out in those 6 months, how on earth are you going to work it out in the rest of the year? A question, please. £1.1 to be cut over 2 years. Have we learned nothing at all about the value of our public health service in the last few months? I think that's the one service that we really by now ought to understand the true value of. Moving on, the biggest fairy tale of the lot, of course. Yeah, it keeps coming up. You're going to charge the bus companies £20,000 a year for using the busway. I don't know how many times they've told you that they won't pay. And in one case, they've actually spelled it out that if you insist on charging for using the busway, they'll simply stop using it and go back to using the ordinary roads instead. The fairy tale. But you persist in pushing it forward. This must be the third or fourth time I've seen it on budget papers. Nothing's happened to it yet. Where do we go from here? Leisure and cultural estate, it's that same story. You've got very precise figures in the budget for your cuts, but you can't explain how that's going to be achieved at all. Well, we've been saying for ages that Luton Council is pretty hopeless at enforcing anything. I just wonder how many dangerous speeding drivers you're going to catch, how many fly tippers, how many persistent litterers. When you're cutting the service from 12 staff down to 8, I think the answer is that being pretty hopeless at enforcing things, it is a good comparison to where you're going to end up with this one. If I was anything to do with deciding on the resources that need to be made available for highways maintenance in Luton, I've got to tell you, I wouldn't be boasting about it when I meet my mates in the pub. Not the officers, of course. They do their best with the resources they're given. But with a near £400,000 cut in highway maintenance, our highways, the condition of our highways, which in some cases are pretty poor now, are going to get a good deal worse. There's no way to avoid it. On the £35 a year for garden bins, yeah, you're currently emptying about 45,000 bins every fortnight. You're going to end up emptying about just over 8,000 bins per fortnight. Bins you're currently emptying that you won't be emptying, and I wouldn't mind betting that a fair amount of that rubbish is going to end up fly tipped, and you're going to be spending more than the cost of emptying the bins in order to clear it up. And we haven't even touched on the damage you're doing to the Education Improvement Service, to children's social care, to the local safeguarding board, the Family Resource Service, children in need and looked after children. We haven't even touched on those issues in any serious way this evening. We told you when you set the budget in February that you were setting a very high-risk budget. We accept that no one could have predicted the coronavirus crisis. It has affected all local authorities, and no other local authority in the country is in anything like this kind of mess. All this is because our Labour Council has awarded its airport sacred cow status. Everything has to be sacrificed for the airport, and as usual, the poorest and most needy residents are going to have to pay the price. We cannot support this budget. We will not support this budget. I ask the Liberal Democrat members here this evening to vote against it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
This are outnumbered anyway, so Labour just push things through.
I would like to ask Councillor Young to make comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Following on Councillor Khan's request that the opposition should help the council, I saw on the photograph with Rachel and Hazel down in London with the 10,000 signature petition. I don't think it got very far. And I also watched the Luton South MP Rachel ask a question of the Prime Minister, and I think the general view was that she got short change from the Prime Minister. At the same time, I initiated a letter on behalf of the Conservative Party in the Conservative group on the Luton Borough Council, and I sent a letter to get all confused. Anyway, the Chancellor of the Exchequer and the local government minister, explaining our unique situation about 2 weeks ago, and I hope maybe we'll get a positive response in the way I did one about 18 months, 2 years ago. Yes, we are in a difficult position. I've lived in Luton now for just over 25 years, and I classify myself as a member of the Luton fraternity, and therefore the Conservative group will be voting for the budget. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Young. Now we are moving on to the next item. I'm going to pass it on to Chief Executive to say a few words.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe I get to sum up before Hazel sums up in relation to those recommendations. So, thank you, Jackie, for your comments. Those were powerful words, and I do feel the emotion as well in having to move this budget and take this approach to deal with the situation that we're in. I thank you, Councillor Aslam Khan, as well, for reminding us that we are in a unique situation. All of local government has been pushed right up to the cliff edge by austerity, but we are more impacted. We own a regionally, nationally significant, which is inappropriate that we invest in. Councillor Tom Shaw provided some helpful clarity on the role of our subsidiaries and the way in which they generate income. And there are some helpful tables for members interested in the role of London Luton Airport Limited in relation to year-on-year increases in funding that comes to the council from that subsidiary. I would absolutely like to thank Councillor Young for being supportive. I would echo Jackie's words that it is an emotional subject, and I've been very critical of the government, so for you to still stand up and be supportive of this budget, and for your Conservative colleagues to do so as well, really means something to us, so thank you for that, and thank you for all the support that you provided in writing letters and lobbying government. Which takes us to Lib Dems, who seem willfully ignorant of reality somewhat. So I won't actually paint all Lib Dems with the same brush. Not everyone is